If they come too close, they will injure one another. But if they stay too far apart, they will freeze. Life, for porcupines, is a delicate balance between closeness and distance. It is hard to get it right and dangerous to get it wrong. And so it is for us. I want to talk today a little bit about relationships, especially what it means when it comes to those people in the Bible, and then how that translates to our interactions with people who are close to us today. And also a little bit about God making distinctions between things, separating things before they can be brought together. That is the force, this idea of separate yet together, that kind of defines the title of our parsha today, Vayigash, and he came close. Then Judah came close to him and said in Genesis 44:18, "Pardon your servant. Let me speak a word to my Lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself." For perhaps the first time in his life, Judah came close to his brother Yosef. The irony is, of course, that he did not know it was his brother. But that one act of coming close melted all of Yosef's reserve, all of his defenses. As if unable to stop himself, he finally discloses his identity. And then with weeping, we read in Bereshit 45:3, "Then Yosef said to his brothers, 'I am Yosef. Is my father still alive?'" How can we be sure that Vayigash, and he came close, is the correct phrase to latch onto here? I believe it contrasts with another verse many chapters before, many years earlier. "But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him." That was Genesis 37:18. Right at the beginning of the story, when Yosef was sent by his father to see how his brothers were doing, tending the sheep, they saw him from far away, from a distance. Imagine that scene. They cannot see his face. All they can see is this richly ornamented cloak, this beloved gift bestowed upon him by his father so many years prior that so upsets them. This coat could well have acted as a constant reminder that it was he, and not they, whom their father loves most. From far away, it is so easy to fall into the trap of seeing people as other than human. And when we stop seeing people as human beings, and they become instead symbols, objects of envy or hate, people are capable of reprehensible behavior toward one another. It has been discovered through psychological experiments of the past that people who would otherwise be incapable of ending the life of another human in close proximity can nonetheless do so when all that is required is to push a button, or the giving of a command to extinguish the lives of many from great distance when those individuals cannot be seen. Sometimes we do this modernly with social media. It is easy to attack someone from the safety of our home when we would otherwise not say those things directly to the individual or individuals we are attacking. Thomas Keller once said, "Enormous poison comes into my heart and into the culture of the world if I forget this, that I exclude my enemy from the community of humans, and when I exclude myself from the community of sinners." The whole tragedy of Yosef and his brothers was distance. They were too far apart in every way, which is why it is only when Judah came close to Yosef, Vayigash, that the coldness between them thawed, and they became brothers once more, no longer strangers to one another. Too much distance, and we freeze. But if we get too close, we can injure one another. That was the story of Yaakov and Esau. Think about that. Yaakov bought Esau's birthright. He stole his blessing. He wore his clothing. He borrowed his identity. Even when they were born, Yaakov was clutching Esau's heel. It was only when there was a distance between them, the 22 years in which Yaakov was away from home with Laban, that relationship healed. So that when they met again, despite Yaakov's fears, Esau embraced and kissed him and treated him like a brother and a friend. Too close, and we hurt one another. too distant, and we freeze. How then do we make and sustain relationships if the balance is so fine and it is so easy to get it wrong? The Torah's answer, already there in the very first chapter of the Torah, is first separate, then join. The verb lechavdil, to separate, appears 5 times in the first chapter of Genesis. God separates light from darkness, the upper and lower waters, sea and dry land. Separation is at the heart of the Torah, between holy and profane, pure and impure, permitted and forbidden. In the Torah, kadosh, holy, means to separate. To sanctify, to make holy is to separate, to set apart. Why? Because when we separate, we create order. We defeat chaos. We give everything and everyone their space. Rabbi Mendel of Kotsk once said, and try to stay with me here, I heard this from another person, and it confused me so much when I heard it, but I felt like there was wisdom. So I found it, and I read it 100 times, and I'm still figuring it out. But ready? If I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you.
Makes sense.
Got it?
Say that again.
I'll print it out for you and put it on your fridge. Once we respect our differences and distance, then we can join without doing damage to one another. First separate, then connect. That seems to be the way of those of faith. Heart-wrenching separations also appear at both ends of Abraham's story. At the beginning of his mission, Abraham was told to separate himself from his father, to leave his home and journey to a land unknown, far away. Towards the end, he was told to separate himself in different ways from each of his 2 sons. These painful episodes represent the agonizing birth pangs of a new way of thinking about humanity. But ultimately, we see his sons standing together again, and he is reconciled with both. That is how Hashem created the universe, and that is how we create real, personal relationships. By separating and leaving space for the other. Parents should not seek to control children. Spouses should not seek to control one another. It is the carefully calibrated distance between us in which relationship allows each party to grow into full individuals. And then to be seen when we stand back and really look at them, but not too far back. The most beautiful symbol of this and its resolution is the ceremony of Havdalah at the end of Shabbat, and especially the Havdalah candle. The wicks are separate, but the flame that they make is joined. So it is between husband and wife, so it is between parent and child, and so it is, or should be, between siblings. Distance damaged the relationships. The relationship between Judah and Joseph, Vayigash. Judah's act of drawing close to his brother restored it. I think, and perhaps this is the most vital piece of all, we must believe and trust in the Father to make things right according to his will. On one occasion, the Master came upon a group arguing vehemently with his disciples. When the Messiah inquired as to the cause of this contention, the father of the afflicted child stepped forward, saying he had approached Yeshua's disciples for a blessing for his son, but they were not able to provide it. With the boy still gnashing his teeth, foaming from the mouth, and thrashing on the ground in front of them, the father appealed to the Master with what must have been a last resort desperation in his voice. If you can do anything, he said, have compassion on us and help us. Yeshua said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to the one who believes. And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Adonai, I believe. Help my unbelief. Hurt comes in many forms and sickness in many guises. We can hurt physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. This man's initial conviction, by his own admission, is limited but he has an urgent, emphatic desire on behalf of his only child. We are told that it is good enough for a beginning. If you have faith like the grain of mustard seed, the master taught, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. With no other hope remaining, this father asserts what faith he has and pleads with the Messiah of the world, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. I can hardly read those words without weeping. The plural pronoun us is obviously used intentionally. The man is saying, in effect, our whole family is pleading. Our struggle never ceases. We are exhausted. Our son falls into the water. He falls into the fire. He is continually in danger, and we are continually afraid. We do not know where else to turn. Can you help us? We will be grateful for anything, a partial blessing, a glimmer of hope, some small lifting of the burden carried by this boy's mother every day of his life. If you can do anything, spoken by the Father comes back to him. If you can believe, spoken by the Master. Straight away, the scripture says, not slowly or skeptically or cynically, but straight away. The Father cries out in his unvarnished parental pain, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. In response to new and still partial faith, the Master heals the boy, almost literally raising him from the dead, as Mark describes the incident. Relationships can fall under the shadow of sickness. Hurts and wounds inflicted can stagnate and fester until they fill the hollow places of our soul with muck and mire, with an all-consuming disease that is every bit as destructive as the plague. I believe, and I think Yosef understood, that our lives are a divine work in progress, with the manifestations and blessings of it abounding in every direction. So please, do not hyperventilate if from time to time issues arise that need to be examined, understood, and resolved. They do and they will. So be kind regarding human frailty, especially as it relates to close relationships. Except in the case of Messiah Yeshua, imperfect people are all God has ever had to work with. That must be terribly frustrating to him, but he deals with it, and so should we. And when you see imperfection, remember that the limitation is not the divinity of the work. When the infinite wisdom and gifts of the Holy One are poured forth, it is not the oil's fault if there is some loss because finite vessels cannot quite contain it all. Those finite vessels include you and me, so be patient and kind and forgiving. Yosef never forgot what his brothers did to him. There was a terrible cost to their actions, but he carved out a space in his soul for forgiveness. And in so doing, he partook of the sweet honey of shalom from a God who turned his suffering into joy as relationships were healed and broken vessels were mended. But it is my hope and prayer that each of us can do the same in our own lives. And I say this in the name above all names, Yeshua the Messiah. Silent crew, tough crowd. I'm going to look at you, Brett, because I feel like you have something to say.
So going back to the Mount of Transfiguration, where the parent, right after that incident,